Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the reality is that every concerned citizen of Trinidad and Tobago is affected by the ills of crime and criminality. And no one in the government hides from that fact or is afraid to confront that fact. Those of us in the government, especially the elected members, all of the elected members of Parliament on this side, are very aware of the ill effects of crime and criminality on our society, on our constituents, and our country. I sit next to the Member of Parliament in this House for Laventille West, who currently holds the portfolio of Minister of National Security. And I give the assurance that that member falls squarely into the category of government members that I've just described. The Minister of National Security, the Honourable Member for Laventille West, is very much concerned about the state of crime and criminality in Trinidad and Tobago. In the many sleepless nights that I am certain he has, as he puts forward his best efforts and gives all and to the best of his ability in doing what he must to provide leadership in the fight against crime. I start off by putting that squarely on the record. Mr. Deputy Speaker, no sensible, civic-minded citizen, including, of course, I hope, all of the elected members of Parliament of this House, should be satisfied with the disregard for laws that are currently being reflected. And when I say currently, I don't mean only at this moment, within the last 5 years, within the last 10 years, I will hazard to say within the last 2 decades. No civic-minded citizen would be satisfied with the disregard for our laws of Trinidad and Tobago that we're seeing from the criminals and the criminal element in Trinidad and Tobago. And having said that, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I also take the opportunity as a concerned citizen, as a concerned parent, to condemn and to put on record, to be recorded in the Hansard on today's date, the 28th of April, 2023, when we were all faced, especially as parents, this morning with what is a criminal act. And I condemn the individual or individuals who saw it fit to wage an act of terror on our school children this morning, on the parents this morning, on the law-abiding citizens today, as they had this baseless, senseless, heartless act of sending messages to various schools throughout Trinidad and Tobago in a bomb threat manner, forcing our young citizens, our children, to be faced with the disruption, and us as parents to be faced with the fear and apprehension as to what this could bring. And that is the position of the government of Trinidad and Tobago. We condemn wholeheartedly and with every ounce of ourselves this cowardly attack that took place on our nation's schools, our teachers, our children and parents today. So to listen to all the rantings and the ravings and the screamings as we just have, let that message not be lost. Mr. Deputy Speaker, as I was considering how to contribute productively to this debate here today, as opposed to what we've just witnessed, not surprisingly, which was a very personalized attack on everybody under the sun, in a most scandalous manner. I want to record that that type of behavior and contribution takes the country of Trinidad and Tobago nowhere but backwards. That type of contribution, when you stand up and all you hear for 45 minutes is a personalized attack on the member opposite, in this case, the Honourable Member of Parliament for Laventille West, and you try to predict what the sensible contributions on this side would be and to countermand it in the manner that we've just heard, is also something that I condemn. Because you see, what we are called upon to do as parliamentarians, and in particular as elected members of parliamentarians, and through you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the population understands what I'm speaking about. And I take the opportunity to just remind that we were elected by the people of Trinidad and Tobago to represent them. And today, the issue we are dealing with is crime and criminality. Even though the motion is couched in a manner to attack a certain member amongst us, who has been given the unenviable and difficult task of carrying the portfolio of Minister of National Security. And I can speak from personal experience, because I carried that on my shoulders for just under 3 years. But what we as citizens must face and what we must discuss and what we must confront is how do we deal with crime and criminality. And it is my submission here today, Mr. Deputy Speaker, through you, that to productively do so, one of the things we must do is look at the criminal justice system and its different components. You heard in passing reference, in the typical derogatory manner, again expected, about a recent event and a historic event that took place under the leadership of the Prime Minister, the current Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, where a CARICOM symposium was had right here in Port of Spain. A symposium under the banner of CARICOM at the invitation of the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago on violent crime as a public health issue. And I take great umbrage in one of the submissions that was made by the previous speaker, the member for Oropuch East, where again, unfortunately, and I look forward to the day when this would not happen, there was a naked attempt to mislead the population through the parliament, where the member for Oropuch East said that absolutely no statement or declaration was made linking public health to crime coming out of the two-day symposium. And you see, that is, I draw it to the public's attention, put the spotlight on it. That is the typical playbook of trying to rewrite facts, to rewrite truth, and to rewrite history by those on the opposite side. So for the population's sake, and to ensure that this August House is not misled, and that the Hansard reflects what is true and accurate, through you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I use a little bit of my time, unfortunately, in having to correct that and referring the population to the declaration by the heads of CARICOM who participated earlier in April, only a few weeks ago, in this symposium. And the declaration that came out of that, which was a strongly worded declaration. I was fortunate enough, along with the member for Aruka Maloney, the Attorney General, the Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, to accompany our head, our Prime Minister, in a meeting with the other heads of the CARICOM, as they painstakingly, early in the morning of the last day, went through what is the declaration that should come out of this crime symposium. And I witnessed firsthand the pain that every single head of CARICOM who was present was personally going through as they related the difficulties in that room and publicly that they are having similar difficulties in their fight against crime and criminality in their country. But I'll come to that. I want to just correct the record. On the 18th of April, the CARICOM heads of government had a declaration and a statement that started, "We, the heads of government of the Caribbean community, CARICOM meeting in Port of Spain, Trinidad and Tobago on April 17, 18, 2023, on the occasion of the regional symposium to address crime and violence as a public health issue." And they start by saying, "Alarmed by the epidemic of crime and violence in the Caribbean, fueled by illegal guns and organized criminal gangs as a threat to our democracy and the stability of our societies." That is recognition of the seriousness of what we're facing, not only in Trinidad and Tobago, but throughout the whole CARICOM region. Cognizant of its cost to our social, economic, and health systems, determined to ensure that our people of the Caribbean can exist in an environment of peace and safety, seized of the urgent need to reverse the normalization of violence in social interaction and to restore the bonds of social solidarity, convinced that the multifaceted nature of violent crime and its pervasive effects require a robust regional response that includes a public health approach. And I need not go any further. Just up to that paragraph, it proves to the population once again how brazen and bold-faced, unfortunately for us as citizens, those on the other side are, that they will come in this parliament when there's a public record in writing of what took place as a very important symposium, a historical symposium, an attempt in full view of the population to mislead them. And population of Trinidad and Tobago, take careful note, because that is the UNC way. To attempt not only to distract by personalized attacks and personalizing everything. You heard it. That is all we witnessed for the last 45 minutes. Nothing of substance. Not surprising. But what is most upsetting about it is the consistent attempts to rewrite history and to mislead the population of Trinidad and Tobago and to paint my country in the worst possible light, which we are not. And I take personal umbrage to that here today, Mr. Deputy Speaker. To go back to the reality and the facts of what we witnessed at that crime symposium, a regional symposium. We had the heads of governments of Jamaica, of Barbados, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Lucia, the Bahamas, and others. Grenada. Every one of them spoke about crime and criminality in the same manner that we did. One of the things that struck me during that two-day symposium is listening to the commissioners of police from the Bahamas and from Jamaica give their presentations to the region. And yet still we come here today on this motion in a frivolous manner by some, thinking it's a joke what it is that has to be dealt with out there. But I want the population of Trinidad and Tobago to know, through you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that this is something, it is a scourge that is taking place throughout the region. And we on this side, they can rest assured, are not afraid to confront it and to deal with the issues of crime and criminality. And we will do so scientifically, and we will do so by resourcing and assisting those who are constitutionally charged with the responsibility to secure our safety in Trinidad and Tobago. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, or prison service, or intelligence services, immigration, customs. There is not a country in the world that authorities don't ask for more resources. So let's not fool ourselves. And the population knows that. You merely need to turn on your television now and look at an American international news channel and see that they are coming to the brink of not being able to pass a budget because of the wranglings taking place in their House of Parliament, their equivalent. and to understand when you listen that it is because all of the bodies want more resources. So if it is anything that I would like the population to understand from my contribution today, is that we on this side are conscientious. We on this side are concerned. We on this side will support the Minister of National Security as he carries out his job. And in a whole of government approach, he will get that support. To sit here today and to listen to the juvenile commentary that, oh, nobody will support and nobody will come to defense and Cheese stands alone, saddens me. Because it shows that there is a lack of maturity. It shows that there's a lack of understanding and a lack of real effort to carry Trinidad and Tobago forward, unfortunately by some. As I was saying in that regional crime symposium, it was the first step. That is acknowledgement of the problem and understanding that throughout the region, we are facing violent crime. And it is a public health issue. And coming out of that, that was stated clearly by every practitioner, one of the great difficulties that we face here in Trinidad and Tobago and the rest of the region, unfortunately, is the influx of illegal arms and ammunition. And what we're facing right now is the reality. And again, in a frivolous manner, making jokes about assault weapons and trying to mislead the population after the heads of CARICOM said that they were going to ban assault weapons. You had some, I was going to use bad language and I reminded myself where I am. You have some people trying to mislead us, the citizens, by referring to the Firearms Act and saying, but look, it's already banned automatic weapons. Yes, in the definition of prohibited weapons in the Firearms Act, automatic weapons are banned. But I put on the record here today that it is assault weapons, and the definition of assault weapons will come. And we know what assault weapons are, and in particular the devastation of the caliber of weapon being used out there on our streets today by the criminals. So don't try to tangle this up. That's about illegal arms, and we are going after legal firearms. That is not true, population. It is the illegal firearms, and we're saying that one of the ways to stop the scourge of legal assault assault weapons is also to say we don't even want the legal ones. And the definition will come. And it will cover what it needs to cover. It is not currently covered. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is important to appreciate that the violent crimes we're experiencing today, especially with illegal firearms, and increasingly with these assault weapons, commonly known as the AR-15s, the AK-47s, 5562 and 762 ammunition, as a phenomenon in the region, and not only in Trinidad and Tobago. It is very difficult, as someone with responsibility to govern this country, to face the types of police reports that the Minister of National Security would face, and to see that what has become consistent in the past few years now, and this is the reality we face. When you get a report on a crime scene now, you see 30 spent shells of 5.56, 20 spent shells of 7.62. One of those rounds of ammunition will kill whoever it hits immediately, unlike 9mm ammunition and .38. And that is why we call them weapons of war, because of the type of destruction. I was speaking to my colleague, who is the MP for Dabadi O'Meara, recently, about something that took place in her constituency. And I want the population to know we, the government, are aware. And that is why we are all putting our shoulder to the wheel to assist and to fight in this thing of crime. Where criminals using these heavy assault weapons were shooting to kill somebody at a parlor, say 50 meters away from a house, and a woman inside of the house who was in the safety and comfort of her bedroom. A 5.56 bullet passed through the wall, passed through her steel door, and unfortunately snuffed her life as she was walking out her bedroom. So to come here today and to listen to those on the other side scandalize individuals, attack the police service. I took great umbrage to hear the previous speaker making fun of the police service on what must be stop and search exercises taking place where they're there with their torchlights, searching vehicles and making fun of them and talking about his friend's purchase of 2 vehicles that would pick up illegal firearms in a vehicle. Well, I want to tell them and tell the population that even with the use of those X-ray vehicles, the police still have to go with their torchlights into the motor vehicle and identify where the illegal firearm is. So to again come and try to mislead the population that there's some vehicle that will just X-ray a passing vehicle and it will, what, by magnet or by miracle, pull out the illegal firearm? No. Yes, it would make it easier to identify, but the police officer still needs to use his or her torchlight to find it in the vehicle once they've identified there's something suspicious. So don't come here as usual in a flippant manner to try to mislead the population. But I get back to my main submissions. How do we deal with the crime and criminality? It is all about the criminal justice system. And very briefly, that talks about separation of powers. What does separation of powers mean? There's a legislature, which is this, the elected members of parliament and the Senate, who pass law. That's one part of it. The second part is the judiciary, who interpret law and make decisions. The third part is the executive, that is the government that runs the country. And those 3 arms have very different responsibilities, but are all necessary to fight crime. I heard the member of parliament for Honourable East say, but look, we supported plenty legislation, some of which we didn't have to support. Allow me to interpret that for the population. Strategically, decisions were taken with certain legislation that doesn't require a special majority, where they know that the government will pass it anyway, and that the people are meant to benefit from that legislation. On a few choice occasions, because if you go and look at the record, the parliamentary record, and see how many debates we have had on legislation related to the fight against crime since 2015 to now, it is a lot more than those few, that handful that you heard that some certain support was given for. But I want to remind the population, through you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, of 2 critical pieces of legislation that I heard the Member of Parliament for Honourable East say that the opposition supported, that required special majority. The first, and I could not believe the audacity to claim support for this piece of legislation, was what we know as the FATF legislation, the Tax Information Exchange Act with the United States. And I remember when that had to be passed, because what it would have done is crashed and collapsed the whole banking system in Trinidad. We as a new government in 2015 to 2016 had to pass that legislation. It required a special majority. What it means is that the Board of Inland Revenue and the Central Bank would provide certain information upon request to the United States Treasury Department for citizens of the United States and those who are required to file tax in the United States. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, those pieces of legislation, they did not support. And they did not support it. And what it meant, I will say what you did. And you can go to the record and it will reflect exactly what I say. Because every time I stand up and say something, it is because I know I have evidence to support it. And let that be a message for beyond this parliament as well. On the first occasion it came, it would have meant if it wasn't passed, there would have been a collapse of our correspondent banking. I remember they did not support it. And then that happened. And the Americans said, well, your system is going to collapse. And the population rose up. And the population said, this needs to be supported because it meant sending money for your child at university, receiving money from a relative in the United States that you need here in remittance couldn't happen. And it was the population that forced them. I remember walking with the then Attorney General, the member for San Fernando West, the member for Aruca Maloney and myself to meet with the opposition because the population had put the pressure. So go and check the records. On the first occasion it came to Parliament, they didn't, because they have a way with certain legislation that requires a special majority of terrorizing the population, driving them to the brink. They did the same thing with the bail legislation and the anti-gang legislation. The record would reflect that when it was a PNM opposition, the PNM opposition supported it because we recognize, even in opposition, how important the safety and security of our population is. Do you get reciprocity when it is the UNC in opposition? The answer is no. So don't come in the Parliament now and claim at the end of the day you supported it. After you terrorized the population and you had to have the police service and the population demand that they support it. We had to come out, if I remember correctly, in a vacation period. And the first thing you had to do is amend to the passage of time, because if you fail with a bill, you have 6 months before you could bring it back. And the parties had to agree that we would pass the legislation in that condensed period of time. I put these on the record to reflect the reality of what we're dealing with. Because unless we all get together in the fight against crime, and it's not old talk, and people trying to be popular and relevant, saying, look, I'm willing to talk with you all. That's not what we're interested in. The population is smart and the population is intelligent, and they know who is really interested in taking Trinidad and Tobago forward. So we come back now to this separation of powers and the criminal justice system. And these are the components of a criminal justice system that has to work in order for us to successfully combat crime in this country. Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, or forensics, the Director of Public Prosecution and his office, defense attorneys and the judiciary. In that makeup, the legislature's role is to pass good law and to pass law that would assist in the fight of crime. That is the policy position. And that's what our responsibility as parliamentarians is. As well as an important component called accountability. So again, I ask the population to look, because you must look to your members of parliament and see what they are doing. And then you will decide in the not too distant future who you are going to ask to continue to govern Trinidad and Tobago. So you look at the accountability part and you look at the joint select committees and ask yourself, especially in the joint select committee on national security, look at the behavior of the members of that committee and see what it is that goes on, because that is where accountability is supposed to come in. So you have a chairman, the member for Port of Spain South, chairing that committee, and they call persons before them. The other day it was the Commissioner of Police and 2 of our most senior officers. I want the population to look at the behavior of people in that committee. And is it that they're utilizing that committee for proper accountability for the people of Trinidad and Tobago? Or is it that they're trying to undermine what is going on out there? I just ask the question and the population will judge in the not too distant future. Another important pillar that we identified very early was you need to have a permanent commissioner of police. Because the population would remember a former attorney general on the other side saying, nah, keep them on a 10 days walk, because that means you could get them to do what you want. So in other words, if you have a temporary commissioner of police, he or she is indebted to you and always worried about whether they'll be renewed. Again, the population can look and see what happened from 2015 under this government. The first thing we did was amend the order to make it simpler to appoint a permanent commissioner of police. The first thing they did in response to that, meaning the opposition, is rush to court, challenge it, and try to stop it from happening. But all the judge did is remove one part, where previously it said that the Minister of National Security commences the process by asking the Police Service Commission to do its job. And that's not interference, Mr. Deputy Speaker. That was because our government wants to get things going. As soon as the court cleared it up, the process began. We had a merit list. We went through the first person.
Honourable Member, your initial speaking time has elapsed. You have an additional 15.
I'd like to use the 15, please,
Proceed.
Mr. Deputy Speaker. Because you see, sometimes it's important to remind the population. And unlike what the previous speaker tried to do by saying we'll go to 2010, I have no intention of doing that. The population knows what went on between 10 and 15. This is what we did and how we approach it, and they will judge us on it. Immediately, we got the process going. The Police Service Commission, they produced a merit list. First person on the list was Mr. Dulal Chan, then a Harold Phillips and Stevens William, not necessarily in that order. The government took decisions not to support, and then the government supported the appointment of a permanent commissioner of police. And that took place with a 3-year term and tenure. And the Honourable Prime Minister has spoken to that and that decision. But what I will say is, again, the population should recall what happened on that day when the government used its majority to appoint the first permanent commissioner of police in many years. No support from the opposition, even though it was one of their former ministers of national security and their colleague. But again, the population will judge and will see that there is a government, a PNM government, of which I am proud to be a part, that took the decision that we need a permanent commissioner of police, and we will take the risk and do what needs to be done for the country. The rest is history. What has happened since then? Once again, we've come and we have appointed another permanent commissioner of police. And for the first time, we have a female commissioner of police. And these are the steps that a responsible government takes in a fight against crime, because as I said, that is the first part of the criminal justice system, the police service. It's not for me to stand up here today and to say how much resources, how many hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayers' money have been provided to the police service. The next part is forensics. Again, we start off today's serious debate with persons laughing at an important milestone at the Forensic Science Center and mocking the current Minister of National Security because he went to a ceremony of handover for a container that is not a 40-foot simple shipping container, which is what they want the population to believe, Mr. Deputy Speaker. This is a container that we as a cabinet looked at over a number of weeks to satisfy ourselves at the behest of the Minister of National Security that it was going to improve the Forensic Science Center. And we decided yes, and we supported him. This container is to contain evidence for the proper containment of forensic evidence. And you would have heard the amount of work and effort that has gone in to what is taking place in forensics and how much quicker the pace is now of turning around evidence exhibits, testing casings, etc. So well done. Well done to national security for that and the police service. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the point is that despite how they want to sell it, the population can look and they can see, and yes, we are facing difficult times, crime and criminality. No one denies that. No one on this side says anything different to that. And we will support and we will continue in our fight against crime. And it is a regional effort now. I have heard this repeated on several occasions, that the opposition were only invited for the opening session of the crime symposium. That is a semantic and a play on words. Because immediately at the coffee break doesn't mean it's the end of the opening symposium, Madam Speaker. There was a mass exodus and departure, but it wasn't over, and no one asked anyone to leave. And immediately thereafter, there was a public announcement reminding that all members of parliament have been invited for the 2 days. So again, don't try to mislead the population and pin something to this government that is not true. It was a strategic decision taken to show a face and to rush outside to the cameras to then say what was said. And that's fine. That is the politics of the opposition. They're entitled to that. But don't try to water down the seriousness and the benefits of what the regional heads of CARICOM did and what came out of that. Because you see, the type of politics we're seeing, Madam Speaker, is nothing but destructive of Trinidad and Tobago. And I could say without fear of contradiction that the members of parliament on this side, the PNM elected members of parliament, the PNM elected members of government, could face all of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago between those two flags that are on either side of the speaker's chair and continue to pledge allegiance to Trinidad and Tobago. And what I am asking the population through you to do, Madam Speaker, is look at the behavior of a party when it is in opposition. Do they support the type of legislation that needs to be passed in the Houses of Parliament that would better Trinidad and Tobago? And quite frankly, the record is not there for the UNC, but it is there for the PNM. So no matter what happens and who comes to stand up in a booth of Parliament and bawl and scream and make veiled threats and to be silly and to have innuendos and to, in the most vile ways, personalize attacks on other members, the population will decide who is it that is better to govern Trinidad and Tobago, as they have in 2015 and 2020. And when it comes to this issue of crime and criminality, I also heard again, in such a juvenile and immature manner, the screaming of, oh, police and security going down to a part of Trinidad for people to frolic, etc. I take umbrage to that. Because I could say under this administration, since 2015, security is provided on a threat assessment basis. And there is no minister here who has personal vehicle with blue lights parading up and down from Hyatt to UDCOT to HDC, down to Pinal, down to... No, it doesn't exist. And if there is a high office holder in this country who is afforded security service by the country and they go to wherever it is they go, and that security follows them, that is on the basis of proper policing. It is nobody in government giving no instruction for joyride and for status symbol, and the country could rest assured that is how this government operates. But I want to remind the country very briefly during that period that we had to outfit security for a house in Pinal, a private house, and helicopter pad and all that kind of thing. That don't happen under this government. There was also a very personalized attack on the member for Laventille West and a speaking about an integrity commission order and a suggestion to the population that something was amiss and wrong. I want to assure the population that was a normal process and procedure where under the legislation of public integrity in public life, you have to file forms, declarations. Sometimes you're busy and you miss your dates, as I have done in the past. And if you don't rectify it, they can go for an ex parte order, so you don't even know they've gone to court, meaning the Integrity Commission. But I tell the population that as soon as the member was served with the order, he did what needed to be done and he rectified it, because that is who he is. He ain't duck and hide from court and make any bacchanal about it. The last thing I want to end by saying, because again, it is misinformation that is being put out there to the population, is there was reference to a case. And again, they just can't help themselves. Remember, for Orpuch East called it a court of appeal case. The High Court, and I understand he's never practiced law, even though he may have a law degree. The High Court is a lower court than the Court of Appeal. The High Court, where Justice Davindra Rampasad is a judge, gave a decision this week, the 25th of April, where the claimant is a Mr. Brent Thomas. And all I'm addressing is, there's a suggestion that he was abducted and brought back to Trinidad on a TTDF plane. It's not a TTDF, it would be the Trinidad and Tobago Air Guard plane. The fact is that did not happen. And it was an RSS plane, the Regional Security Services, out of Barbados. And I say no more because the court will deal with that at the appropriate level. But don't come now to try and tarnish the police service of Trinidad and the Defense Force of Trinidad. I, as a citizen first and foremost, take great umbrage to anyone who attacks those who are trying to do right in Trinidad and Tobago. So I put that on the record. The last thing I'll end by saying, just to correct the record, Madam Speaker, is the member made a statement. He said the member for Parliament for Laventille West was asked in question time today, have you contacted our international partners to find out who committed this cybercrime act, meaning the bomb scares this morning, to again try to mislead the population? Our cybercrime unit in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and our intelligence services have the capability to do what needs to be done electronically, to trace what needs to be traced. And you don't pick up a phone and call anybody international partner and say, hey, tell me what the IP address came from or where this bounced from. For evidential purposes, that will have to be done via MLAT. And if that needs to be done, I can give the assurance to this population, it will be done. Madam Speaker, may I ask how much time I have left?
You have just about 3 minutes left.
Thank you very much. It allows me to address two more things. There's also a narrative being painted here today that because, and we've condemned it in the highest ways, what happened this morning with the bomb scare, that the National Security Council was bypassed or the National Security Council had no role to play. It slipped the member for Parliament for Laventille West because we spoke about it as he sat down and he's asked me to correct the record. The National Security Council was alerted to these threats that were taking place this morning almost simultaneously after it happened. The National Security Council then exchanged communications amongst each other. In addition to that, you had the chairman of the National Security Council speak directly to the Minister of National Security. So when you hear a suggestion by the other side that the member for Siparia would have called an emergency meeting, we act a lot more efficiently than that. Because you see, to call such a meeting may have meant a helicopter ride. We don't need any helicopter ride. We immediately convene in the mode that we have to discuss and to pass information between ourselves, and I tell the population that was done first thing this morning. So, Madam Speaker, as my time has run out, I want to assure the population of Trinidad and Tobago that this government is very cognizant and concerned about not only what happened this morning, which we condemn in the highest possible terms, but about the level and scourge of crime and criminality throughout the region that we, unfortunately, in Trinidad and Tobago, too, are faced with. And I give the assurance that we will continue to do what we need to do to the best of our ability to provide for the safety and security of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Naparima.